The Seahawks and the 49ers are going to rough each other up on Sunday night. That's the culmination of the 2019 season. Game number 256. The game with the most incredible, most dramatic, most significant potential swings. And for the 49ers, it's as big of a swing as it can get, Chris, because if they win, they're the 1 seed, period. No matter what happens earlier in the day. Beat the Seahawks in Seattle, 49ers are the 1 seed. Lose, and they're the 5 seed going on the road to face the Cowboys or the Eagles in the first round of the playoffs next weekend. Both these teams really need a bye week. For the Seahawks, depending upon what happens earlier in the day, they're going to be playing for the 3 seed versus the 5 seed, the 2 seed versus the 5 seed, or the 1 seed versus the 5 seed. Now, I don't know that it's realistic for the Seahawks to have the 1 seed up for grabs. They would need the Packers to lose to the Lions and the Saints to lose to the Panthers. I think the way it's going to play out is the Seahawks are going to be playing for the 3 seed versus the 5 seed, which means they would host the Vikings in the wild card round. That is what I think is ultimately going to happen. But if they win, if the 49ers win, though, they're the 1 seed, and the Seahawks end up on the road playing the Cowboys or the Eagles. Either way, a lot is hanging in the balance for this primetime game in Seattle. And I'm having a hard time. I did my official PFT picks yesterday. We're doing our picks podcast later today. I reserve the right to change my pick from yesterday on any of the games.
Okay.
And I'm really thinking about changing my pick on that one because it felt good about 49ers yesterday. But the more I think about it, man, it's Seattle. It's prime time. They have some ridiculous record under Pete Carroll. Like, they never lose at home at night. They never do. How can we ignore that going into this night game against the 49ers?
Well, no, I hear that. You're right. I mean, they're a special team at home, at night in prime time, but not that special at home this year. I think that's the first thing we need to talk about. I mean, yeah, the Seattle 12 home field advantage has not been as great this year. Definitely not. Plus, the Seahawks are reeling a little bit. They really are. I mean, hey, Jadeveon Clowney, he hasn't been out there for a defense that's in Strugglesville. Offensively, you talk about Dwayne Brown, all the running backs, all those things. I'm concerned about the Seattle Seahawks. There's no other way to say it. With the injuries they've had, Quandre Diggs banged up at the safety position, but just the injuries they've had to a defense that's not all that great to begin with. And then on offense, Mike, that you hear me talk about a lot, I mean, their game is about overpowering people up front. Oh, now we're playing man-to-man, and Russell Wilson's going to hit you deep. But they're not the type of offense that's going to just surgically dissect you in the pass game. Boom, 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 boom. That way, when the run game's not working. That's not what they're made to do. Their offensive schematics in the passing game are not like special or creative that way. So I am concerned, and I think to your home field point, Mike, like Seattle, maybe other than Green Bay in the NFC, is a team I look at that needs home field advantage or the bye week maybe just as much or needs it more than anybody else in the NFC to get to the Super Bowl, I guess is my main point there.
Yeah, and I as I said earlier, I think both these teams desperately need a week off. The 49ers had their bye in week 4. The Seahawks are a work in progress now, dealing with all these injuries. They've got Marshawn Lynch and Robert Turbin back on the team. I was joking on Sunday night about Marshawn Lynch returning to the Seahawks, but there weren't a lot of options out there at running back. And as it turns out, Lynch was kind of plotting this potential return, and it all worked out perfectly for him, not perfectly for Chris Carson or C.J. Prosise, because they're both on injured reserve now, along with Rashad Penny, but they needed the help, and they have Lynch back. And Chris, and your guy Kyle Shanahan talked about this earlier in the week about how hard it will be for Lynch and Turbin to make an impact right away. They're not in football shape. Now, They got fresh legs, right? So that'll help them in a week or 2 or 3 if the Seahawks are still alive, but it's going to be very hard for them to make an impact right away when they're just not in football shape.
Yeah, no, exactly. And to those out there going, what the hell is that? Well, yeah, they got fresh legs, like Mike said. So when, those first few carries of a game, they're going to come out looking, just explosive as can be. But it's, it's plays 8 through 12, 8 through 15, carries 5 through 10 when you're running through the line of scrimmage and you're just going all out, pedal to the metal, dragging people, hitting people, anxiety and adrenaline flowing at its utmost. That's what football shape is. And that's it's impossible to replicate that intensity and that emotion, let alone the physical output you're putting when, DeForest Buckner's about to hit you, Richard Sherman's about to hit you. Oh, now I need to outrun Jaquaski Tart to this sideline. That's football shape, and there's nothing you can do there. I expect Marshawn Lynch, it sounds like he's in pretty good shape to be a contributor, but can he rip off big plays and make game-changing plays at the running back position? That's one where I got to see it to believe it.
Yeah, I agree with you, and I think the longer that they last in the postseason, the greater the potential impact Marshawn Lynch will have. And who knows? Some people view him as a fringe Hall of Famer. I think he should get in based upon what he's already done. But he could do enough over the course of January to really put some icing on top of the cake to get himself in if he can have an impact when we get to wild card round, divisional round, championship round. Who knows? They may not play in the wild card round at all. It all comes down to whether or not they win on Sunday and whether or not they get the help they need in the form of the Lions beating the Packers and or the Panthers beating the Saints. Consider some of these historical facts, though, Chris, as it relates to the 49ers-Seahawks rivalry in Seattle.
Right.
The 49ers are 1-9 in Seattle this decade. Their only win came against Tavares Jackson in 2011. That's it. They have not won in Seattle the rest of the time they've played there this decade, including playoffs, and they've never scored 20 or more points in Seattle during the Pete Carroll era. That is scary. And I know that that's all the past and it can all be different now. And this is a better offense than the 49ers have arguably ever had during their time over the past decade. But it's the kind of thing that gets me a little nervous about my prior belief in the 49ers winning the game.
Yeah, well, I get it. I mean, mystique there is something to that to a degree. Of course, those stats are the way they are because Seattle had an almost dynasty in the first half of this decade, of course, and a defense that was, rewriting the record books and doing special things that way with the Legion of Boom. But I do think this is a different San Francisco 49ers team as far as any that they've seen here in recent history. I mean, the explosiveness on the offensive side of the ball is pretty top-notch. Shanahan has great comfort level with Pete Carroll. I feel like, again, I'm already saying it. I'm picking the 49ers to win this football game. I got Seattle. With Seattle, all the injuries, and I understand the 49ers got injuries on defense too, and they're reeling. But with Seattle and all the injuries, the way they've played as of late, which is losing 2 of 3 and really not looking impressive in 2 out of those 3, and added to the fact I don't think it's realistic the way they won game 1, which was the Jadeveon Clowney F up the play extravaganza. I mean, that's what it was. If you go back and look at the team stats for 4 quarters, the Seahawks were around 230 total yards. Their touchdown drives were 24 yards, 16 yards, things like that. I don't know if it's realistic for them to win that type of game again against the San Francisco 49ers. I guess that's my big question, Mike.
And as you mentioned, the Seahawks aren't nearly as good at home this year as they've been in the past. 4-3 at home and 7-1 on the road. Embarrassed on Sunday against the Cardinals. And you could look at that and say, well, it makes it even more likely they'll find a way to win this one because you can't imagine them losing 2 games in a row at home, but they should have lost to the Rams earlier this year. They've had that horseshoe up their butt, as you like to call it, on so many different occasions this year. It's almost like it just had to run out at some point, like with the Steelers. How many games can you continue to win when you're not the better team, but you just have all these other things that happen your way? You can't make a living. You can't make it to the playoffs. You can't make it to the top of the mountain with just everything lining up your way and allowing you to escape with a victory. You can't sustain that.
No.
And I think we've seen it with the Steelers and we're seeing it with the Seahawks. They can't sustain it. Although they are one of the best teams in the NFC, there's a gap between them and the 49ers, and games that they won, some of the games they won, they should have lost. But you can't look at any of the games they lost and say they should have won.
No, you're right. And, they're not made for home football right now. What makes home like a home field advantage? Great crowd noise, great defense. And Seattle, that's great crowd noise, but the defense is not good. It's towards the bottom of football. Pass defense is really not good. And they're one of the worst sack teams in all of football. So, that's what a crowd noise is supposed to do, right? Is help the front four, the defensive line, get off the ball just a split second before the offensive line does, because they can't hear the snap counter. They're trying to look at the ball, whatever that may be. Those are one of the things the Seattle Seahawks don't have this year. They're built a little bit more around their offense. They're trying to kind of rebuild this defense. That's why they signed Ezekiel Ansah and Jadeveon Clowney. But they've been hurt and banged up, so they've never really got to go through a stretch of games of going, okay, we're totally 100%. We can start taking it over. We never got to that point with Seattle this year, and that's why we've seen them carved up at home a bunch of times too. I mean, even in your Vikings game, it wasn't a great showing, right? You think about that game, the Monday Night Football game. A lot of big plays Kirk Cousins and the Vikings made against that defense. It's just not the same defense we've grown accustomed to seeing in Seattle.
Hi, I'm Mike Tirico, and thanks for watching. Make sure to hit subscribe for the latest news and highlights from NBC Sports.